live.
Okay, this is House Education on February 26, 2025. This is really just about an hour of committee time to discuss what we heard yesterday in the presentation of the legislative language of the governor's educational transformation plan, and really kind of lay the groundwork for this committee as to what we're doing next, what our thoughts are on what it is what we believe we can accomplish year one. Do we want to think about laying out a plan that is a multi-year plan that says in year two we might do this? I guess I would open it up just to start off with for any general thoughts people had about the plan insofar as how that affects what we're trying to get accomplished here. Yes.
I think that we need to move beyond the 5-district proposal to something bigger. Is this like the appropriate conversation to talk about that?
I threw it open for any comments.
Okay.
This is great.
When I hear about the way that, this proposal would give school board members, and that in some of these new districts, and that would be based on population density in some of these new districts, it feels like we're about to disenfranchise whole rural communities. And the fact that the Secretary of Education said that that's in the purview of GovOps and the Secretary of State, I don't think that we can be putting forward a plan if we don't know the long-term consequences of that plan. Like, that's the responsibility when you put out the plan to know how this would affect those communities. And if I can't get those numbers, I couldn't possibly vote yes on a plan that could disenfranchise my entire region.
At a certain point, we can take a deeper dive. GovOps is sort of taking on, like, how do you divide up voting? How do you create wards so you don't have big franchise or under or overrepresented?
Right, but if we go,
so we could take a deeper dive into that at some point.
it just seems like with the, people are asking for, like, let's come up with a plan, let's solve this. And I feel like I don't want to use wasting time, but we're spending so much time on a plan that I think ultimately we're going to need to do more districts. So, like, at what point can we say, like, we're rejecting the number of districts? And obviously that would take a vote. I don't know that everyone agrees with me, but, like, if that was the direction we were going, when do we get to say, like, we would move forward with some of this, but we need more districts?
That's a huge question, big question.
Yeah.
We have to talk about. Yeah. Other.
Kate, did you have a question? You had your hand up.
I was just gonna say that I feel like we've had a couple of opportunities to share with the secretary that we would like to see where the savings is gonna take place. And we still haven't seen where 180 million is gonna get saved by moving in this direction. So I'm still waiting for those kind of answers. And I don't know that we're ever gonna get them. And the one time they had somebody who I'm assuming was a consultant that they paid come in and talk about his big district that he was going to create. We're talking about giving whole groups of teachers a pay cut. And I guess I just am not sure how this helps.
Casey, sorry, Rob, actually.
Okay, sorry. So, on page 2, it's just kind of funny. And this, I'm going to bring in something that isn't in here, but it should be, or it could be. They equate performance and funding. Like, in other words, if we do a better job funding everybody the same, we'll have better performance, right? But one thing that I think that there's a step that we keep missing. We are so understaffed as far as teachers. And worse, we have like a revolving door on the principals, many of the principals, right? They're around for 2 years, they move on. So I'm saying that like transforming education is a great idea, right? Streamlining the whole thing is a great idea. But like, I feel like we're stepping over something that's fundamental. And again, I can say my piece and you guys can move on, but I think that teacher recruitment, leadership in schools, and leadership keeps people in. Like, you got a good manager, someone who's making you feel like you exist and being a great mentor. Like, to me, like there's a basic level that relates to performance and relates to schools and relates to the work culture that it's easy to ignore, right? It's easy to say, well, we have 290 schools and we should have 220 and we got too many small schools, right? We can do all that. But I'm just saying, is there any place in any of this to talk about teacher recruitment and professional development and principals that are going to be around for 10 or 15 years in a school and create culture? Like, to me, you could throw money at a problem and you can say on page 2 that better funding is going to equal better performance. But, we all know that that's not always necessarily true. Equal funding. I want Harpole School to have a theater. Yeah, you better believe it. I do. But I also believe that there's a fundamental thing here that it's kind of like nobody's talking about. Anyway, there, I said it. I don't know if it belongs in here. I don't know what it is, but I'm just saying.
All right, yeah, Casey, then that.
I just want to say that in this proposal, there is no cut to teacher pay. The average 5,000 salary increase that was mentioned is to give those places where and I agree with you, Rob, there are places there, we're over Vermonters that, those schools struggle to recruit, good quality teachers that don't necessarily want to invest in their community there because they get out of school, they graduate college, they take the first job they can get, and then they wait to move back to Chittenden County or Franklin County or Addison County, and they get those higher salaries, and they have those opportunities. I think this plan is to solve those problems and try to get teacher recruitment into those communities to help invest in those communities, in those schools, and those students. So no, there's not a part in here that will say they're going to cut teacher salaries. I think it's an average across the system to make it more competitive. And I might have something else, but it just dropped out of my head.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, I'll come back if I think of it.
So mine's related to that as well. When you can't staff the schools we have and a teacher is teaching multi-grades and then the next year it's different multi-grades and then it's different multi-grades and teachers are working harder than they have to. And principals cannot be instructional leaders and have culture because my principal is locked behind her door having to deal with things that have nothing to do with what she really got in there to do and what we all got in there to do.
Yep.
So I think it is a move. And I'm not saying I agree with everything that's in here. I'm just saying, I think part of the quality piece is to bring it a little more, a lot up to scale so that you're not so understaffed and underwater and having to deal with pushing paperwork around and filling out reports. And you can actually teach and lead. Not having to reinvent the curriculum in every district, everywhere in 119 places. It's been very good.
Thank you for the comments. So just in my role, I worry, or I think about our timing.
Yeah,
And again, what we can accomplish. And I want to just have realistic expectations.
mhm,
And I don't think that realistic expectations are the same thing as rejecting, the plan that was put before us yesterday, because, I mean, let's face it, what's going on at the AOE end, they're out there having, multiple sprint team meetings. And as the secretary said, it's to inform them, getting feedback on the proposal as well. So, that clearly demonstrates that it's a process that remains in motion, even though we now have language. I also think about that, it's February 26th. And we need to move on. I think Vermonters have said, let's start working toward change.
mhm.
And I think we need to start sort of saying, okay, we're comfortable moving ahead with this, we're not comfortable moving ahead with that. When we go, Brown to McCann, then Harbaugh.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to sort of the timelines that we're all working under, I guess I'm not really clear even on sort of an academic level that the legislative language we saw yesterday even sort of meets the achievement of the high level goals that we heard. Like, I feel like there's still an awful lot of details to be filled in in terms of like, how does that bill actually achieve the really high level concepts that we heard in the AOE's plan? So I think, you know, in terms of, that there's a lot to be done in getting feedback from the field. There's also a lot to be done to even operationalize the suggestion that we're all sort of thinking about.
So to answer one of those concerns, we will have, this afternoon, we have a joint hearing with legislative council to sort of get their opinion as to, is there enough meat on the bones here to make the vision reality? I think if we're gonna hear about holes that need to be filled, and must be who needs to fill it. I said Brown, Tooth, McCann, Harple.
And I think to answer your question, I think timeline wise, things we need to do this year. This is just coming from me. I think what we need to have our districts set. I think we need to figure out what we want to do if it's 5. I know I'm hearing that there's not a lot of love for 5. Where else do we want to start? Where can we start looking at that? And we need to have some kind of, if it's the foundation formula or whatever it is, the funding. I think those are the 2 things that we need to accomplish in this legislative session this year before we leave. And I think those are the 2 big ones. And then I think we can work around the intricacies and the main details of each one of those things once those 2 are set in place. That's just my thought. I mean, I know there's a billion other things that aren't in here that we haven't scratched the surface on CTEs. We scratched it yesterday, pre-K, and there's all these unanswered questions. But I think districts, what we want for district sizes and how we fund it. I think that's what we really need to focus on going forward.
Great. And then these comments are very important because we need to focus on what we're gonna be doing. Thank you. Kate.
And I just want to remind myself that what we heard from voters is we need to change the way we fund public education. I don't think that I heard from voters that we need to change the way we deliver public education. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about 2 different things and make sure that we're not throwing away the good stuff that we do already for kids with our public education system.
Or more specifically, voters may have said, lower my property taxes.
Lower, that's exactly what they said.
Leanne, you're next.
So I don't know how it works with like, if we wanted to replace language or make a change, like, is this bill ours now to replace language? But one of the things I would suggest is that we seriously consider going with 17 districts and do the CTE. Like I've heard a lot of support for that. That's way less than 119 and makes more sense.
We're gonna pause the
Okay.
district discussion
Okay.
for a few minutes. Yeah, Representative Wong.
So I guess I'm hearing, it feels like I'm hearing general consensus that it's a multi-year process we're going through. We now have a bill in front of us that we haven't even done a complete walkthrough yet. But we also have a bill that we started working on ourselves. And I guess I would ask, because that really was developed by priorities based on discussions that we'd had in this room. Where does that land? And is that a starting place for us as opposed to this? And I think it's important we clarify that.
Yeah, I think vehicle, what vehicle we use will be important. But we need to get our contents first, but I think that.
Well, it's not just vehicle, I'm talking content.
Yeah.
I mean, that vehicle has content that we had all agreed, including the school construction aid and.
No.
Right,
I didn't agree to it.
yes,
I understand that.
yes. Go ahead.
I'm gonna back up a little bit, sorry, because I didn't speak the first round here, but definitely I've always said I think we need to go districts first. So I second what Rep. Tooth is saying. And I would say that I know that in my district alone, we do talk about outcome and delivery all the time. The outcome isn't where we should be. So we do consistently talk about, it might not have been the vote might not have been, the vote might have been property taxes, but there's consistent discussion about testing outcomes in our district. And the need to achieve more.
I think Brown was next.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to the very start of the session. So like before we sort of start mapping out our timeline, like is there agreement in this room that we've sort of laid a foundation for statewide transformation of our public education system? So I mean, I think the secretary came to us with her listen and learn tour results and was pretty transparent about some significant and serious challenges that exist today in education. And so I just sort of wonder, for me personally, like, what do we need to do to address those or at least acknowledge how they fit into this larger transformation puzzle? So, you know, if we don't have an agency that is currently at capacity or has enough expertise to accomplish, you know, pick a project from the last decade, you know, how do we transform our entire system?
We'll need to, focus into what I'm hearing is that we have some consensus around that. We're not gonna take this and make it a reality tomorrow. That districts need to be addressed. Might I just throw on the table some smaller achievable? We have heard consistently that class size is not only educationally sound way to go, but also in and of itself creates efficiencies. Yes, Leanne.
The other part that I think that we need to bring up, that is questionable is the school choice school part. I don't think that we should be including public tuition to private schools. I mean, I think with the exception of those academies that have helped our communities to exist in certain areas. But I don't know whether to leave it on the table and say, well, if we're gonna have school choice schools, it can't include private schools or just no school choice schools unless there's like a.
I just for the sake of efficiency, I personally do not believe that we can tackle that as an achievable in the next year. I'm not saying that concept is to go away. And there are concepts within the school choice school proposal that I think we could take some serious looks at. But I guess what I'm saying is let's not take on the school choice school issue right now.
So does that mean if we pass the bill, it will just include school choice schools?
No, we will,
Okay.
we will craft a bill. It could be taking the two Taylor educational transformation. Project
Love it. Taylor's on it now. I
and
guess.
completely reworking it, or we could be taking our committee bill and completely reworking it. But to me, what's important is that it has the concepts in it that we can all agree on.
Okay.
That are achievable. And so let me just throw out a couple more. And then I think we will spend some time just talking about districts, and what's our strategy going for that. But, I mean, does everybody say, or do we have agreement on class size?
Something has to be done.
Well, what we do have is,
numbers.
we have different proposals. We have the Superintendent's Association kind of came in with a policy brief based on some research. There are those numbers. The big proposal took a different tack. It took a ratio tack, but it's a little bit challenging in that,
Mathematically.
you have to define teacher. And to me, it brought up a lot more questions than simply saying, going with the other route. And I would also say that we could also talk about, grade.
That's a good grade size.
I think
grade banding,
in going with class size, I see all the reasons why that's more efficient. I just want to make sure that there's still some flexibility, especially for our rural schools where it's hard to get more kids together or where we have AP kids and there's only 5 that want to take that AP class and we can't just be like, sorry, we're not going to offer
We
AP.
are absolutely good.
Okay.
As we move forward, we absolutely have to take all of the carve outs and exceptions and all. of
Okay.
that. And how do we build in the flexibility? that we can have? You're absolutely right.
I have a different view on public dollars in independent schools just because of where I'm from and that there aren't any public schools to choose from.
That's
No
why
place
I'm
else to
saying
go.
keep
So,
it.
but, I would agree definitely on districts because it's not just our work. The Ways and Means Committee, for example, the foundation formula as it currently exists is based on 5 districts and the modeling is different if there's 10. And I know they're working on it and they're looking at different ones, but having some guys there and also government ops has to be, there are other committees of jurisdiction and, labor relations if we combine the whole piece of
Oh,
combined.
yes.
So want to make sure we're not holding up the work other committees have to do.
I'm gonna just,
You know, but-
let's think about working from the smallest level to the
Smallest
highest
main
level.
size to
So we've
biggest.
talked about class size, we've
Yeah.
talked about grade, bands. Sort of, and these are all things we can put into the educational quality standards. Then we can move into school size, which I realize is more challenging and require more carve outs. But do people, if we could come up with language, this, in our remaining time, where we have to get Bill out of here, do people see these as achievables to put in? Not that they are immediately gonna happen, because that's not the way it works, but they are things that we could agree on and sort of move forward with in a way that is operationalizable.
Can I just say one more thing about the lottery thing that's in this bill?
Yes.
She kept referring to it as, you know, it's gonna be a non-discriminatory lottery, and I think by definition, because of the way that parents support their children and have transportation, the sheer existence of it is gonna be discriminatory. So I just wanna get that out there. It's going to cater to kids who are already have a leg up.
I would just say that language actually already exists. It's how we do public high school.
Yeah.
choice
Okay,
right now.
but then we should, I mean, I don't know what to say. It already is discriminatory then.
I'm with you. Well, it's just you get.
All right, shall we take our districts?
Let's do it.
All right,
Maybe we could get that done before lunch.
yeah, sure. All right, so this is a big question. I think that it has been put out there, even the field struggles, not with how many, but just like, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Oh, I should say with how many. We've got a bunch of different things. Annie has been working with the GIS folks over at the Agency of Digital Services to provide a tools that we can lay over things. However, I will once again, and I'm gonna throw this out for debate. Are we the right people to draw the lines? Or are we the right people to say, we want in January, some entity to come back with district line proposal of a number of districts between this and this? Yeah.
I think whatever it is, it needs to make sense. There needs to be a reason. And I don't see how there can be an educational reason if we're not involved in that discussion.
Well, I guess we could be involved in the discussion of, I mean, first of all, it would come back to us.
Yeah.
And then, and again,
Right.
you all can say, Peter, and we've been round and round with this a bunch of times. We think we should draw the lines, but that would mean that we are spending every day in here with
Right.
maps out, drawing lines and calculating every repercussion of every decision we make.
I guess what I mean is that just like hypothetically, it's 17 because it's CTEs, it's 14 because it's counties and those communities already exist. It's 5 because the Agency of Education decided that it was, I mean, I don't know why they.
Representative Wong?
Well, I just in response to this conversation, I don't think it really makes a difference whether I have an opinion about this, I'm not gonna share it till the end, but whether we should do it or whether someone else does, what's really critically important to get at what your concerns are is that this committee sets the parameters around
Right.
what our goals are. And whether we have, even if we're gonna be the ones to sit down with the maps in front of us, just like Chair Conlon said, we're gonna need all that done first.
Yeah.
We need to decide what that is. So I'm less concerned about that part than I am concerned about us making sure that we're very clear on the direction to ourselves or to an outside entity. And frankly, I do think that it makes sense to consider whether we charge the state board with this or charge an outside group, whatever, to do it as long as we are clear and consistent with what our expectations are and the goals. And whether we do it between a certain number to a certain number or not, that's up to us to decide as part of that conversation.
Yeah,
Set
so
them up.
I think you're absolutely right. We should have, whether whoever does it, we need to have a discussion about what are our clear and
Mhm.
concise goals and our guidance. Yes.
I would say also if it is given to someone other than us, that the makeup of who that is needs to be very thoughtfully thought out, that it's not just you know, it's from people from all around the state, people that are in education, people that are not entrenched in education. You know, that it's balanced and fair.
Or,
You know, we may set those parameters of who exists, if there is a commission, who is on this commission.
and I would say, short of being able to get everybody you want, you require them to listen to everybody you want, which is what we always do. Chris, you're next.
If we're gonna draw the lines, I say we draw the line. I say we draw. If we're gonna make the decisions, then we gotta just do it, right? But it was also suggested, it makes perfect sense that lines have to be drawn, the bigger districts have to be drawn, utilizing school district lines as they currently are, as a boundary, right? You wanna keep the school districts as they are still intact within a bigger district because of the transition that's gonna occur.
When they make sense.
When they make sense.
Some don't.
Yes, and
Roxbury didn't make sense. I imagine there's
Yeah.
other things. out
I also
there
think that
don't.
regardless of who does this, we can't just like kind of take the population of Vermont and be like, okay, let's make each district equal, because this is Vermont, there still will be small schools, and we're not, like, we have our cities and we have our, I mean, geography is gonna be just as important. I guess that's what I'm saying. And so like, I just wanna make sure that whoever does it isn't just like, oh, it's easy because you just divide it up by the number of people.
Does it make sense that the commission that we already put together maybe draw the lines?
Well, so we have the conversation about who might do it, who might present us in January 2026 with a proposal. And I just want to say that redrawing district lines and how many districts is really complicated. Not just the issue of, are the current lines good? Is Roxbury makes sense? Down in
Mine are
south of
all
Route
over.
4 and Route 9 especially, it's like, I don't even know how it works down there.
I do.
And, I don't remember where I was going with this big comment. But, you know, there are issues over, how is education delivered in each of those
Right.
districts? Right now, we don't
Right.
really have, you can't really have a district where one group of people has tuitioning and one group has, K-12 school. If we are gonna draw the lines, then we have to address that.
Mhm.
It's pretty challenging to figure out how we address that from a statutory point of view. Yes.
As I said right now, I'll be a hard no on dividing drawing lines for here. I think we
Are you prepared to lead us through the line drawing
But I
process?
think that we have people in this building that are ready to draw lines. Whether it's our committee or not, I think we've got people in this building ready to draw lines, and we need to move forward.
Are they the right people to be drawing lines?
Is a committee of the right people to be drawing lines?
I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just gonna refer back to, a couple of the superintendents who've been in committee recently. I think, Elaine Collins from, up in NCSU, has said, it's interesting, I think we've heard this from a number of people with sort of varying degrees of bluntness, that they need sort of a thoughtful, deliberate, transparent process around how we come to agreement on all of these things. And I think, in my mind, setting up, a commission, a working group to sort of go through that process in a way that's really transparent and able to engage the public is pretty important. And I think that also goes back to the superintendent from Norwich, gave us some really thoughtful testimony about the process that he went through. And I'd have to go back and read it, but I think he was pretty clear that the process itself was really important to allow people to sort of plug in and engage, give feedback. Like that had to happen over a period of time. It wasn't something that just sort of sprang into being quickly.
And also, I think that same testimony had the data, when it's data driven,
Right.
it takes the biases out.
Right.
So, in terms of another committee, I know GovOps has been talking about this. One has to ask, do they understand the complicated nuances of the way our schools work currently? Or is the goal to just divide it up based on population like we do, reapportionment or whatever it happens to be? Just a
You should
question.
answer that.
Casey, go ahead.
I would answer your question. I think, yes, I would be ready to start drawing lines. I think that I would be ready to listen to people this year. I'd agree with Representative Taylor on that. We need to be bold and like ready to make decisions. And I think we also have to remember, with the 5 districts, that's where we saw the saving. That's where the AOE had presented, the savings are in there with their 13,200. I think if we go too far with like too many districts, I think that changes the formula on that too. So I think it's really gonna be important for us to consider that too. Every time we talk about changing it to 5 to 10 to 20 or 30, it changes how that formula is gonna work. So this is gonna have to be work in consultation with Ways and Means when we're doing this. So I think that's why I agree with Rep. Taylor that it needs to be done ASAP, so that they can figure that budgeting stuff out too. Because like I said, those are the 2 things I think we need to have done this year. So I would be willing to go with some kind of mapping. We have several maps up here. We can play around with lines on it, but I think we are ready for it. So I'm just, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to create some kind of an ad hoc committee that had gov ops and education and maybe Ways and Means on it to just do this job and
Okay.
present it?
So I'm not quite sure how that, from just a parliamentary point of view, I'm not quite sure if you can create a
Okay.
committee out of thin air and then
Well,
provide the necessary public access to, that work.
I mean, you'd have to put in a bill to create that committee.
I
I was gonna
Okay.
say something similar. We don't have to work in silos. We're still there.
Yeah.
Right.
We can have joint meetings
Yeah.
with
Yes.
government ops and get all of our expertise together. They have expertise at drawing lines,
Yeah.
a certain format that they utilize. We have expertise in the education world, so we don't have to work in silos.
I would just say that they have had testimony in GovOps, or they have had commentary in GovOps that has also said perhaps a different entity needs to do this work.
Yeah, so I think we need to have this conversation about the role of GovOps and the timing of GovOps and all of this, because I have been taken aback quite a bit by the forward momentum happening outside of this committee around district lines. When, if you look at what their role is, it's a critically important role once the lines have been established essentially by the education of our students, and that lies in our purview. I'm not trying to minimize what their job is, but their job isn't to create the lines. Their job is to decide how the elections process will take place once we have done that. And so I feel, that work has been premature and has been put us in an awkward position, frankly. There's work we need to do before we can get to that point. And I think it's a distraction, and I think it's unfortunate.
In my head, I'm saying to myself, how do we do it? As opposed to an outside entity for delivering us a package, what we would need to devote all of our time to it, really everything else would be off the table. Because every decision that we would make would need public feedback, and especially from the field. And so, let's think of some scenarios. Let's say, okay, we're gonna draw the lines. You and Casey, say, we want the 5. That's gonna require significant testimony to get feedback on. And then if we sort of move on from that to, even, let's say, the PICUS said, size 3,900, BSA said size 3,900, let's say we went with a guideline of 3,900 students per district. And set forth that, again, it's how we here would do that work. I'm finding it hard to conceptualize. So let's say I said, Chris, you're a big fan of drawing these lines this year. How do we go forward with that?
I think we need to decide on the number. I mean, that's right off the bat. I mean, we need to decide on a number that we're all comfortable with, that we believe would function, and start with that. And then we can continue to move on to the next step. You know, it's, yeah, we haven't even come up with it. Right.
When we've had some numbers, sorry.
Oh, no, exactly. No, we've had a lot of proposals and we could literally pick one of those.
I mean, does anyone have, I mean, as we all sit here today, does anyone have a sense of like on the numeric range of what the new district landscape could look like? You know, if we try to line that up with policy goals, like, do we even have a sense of like, okay, 5 large district gets us, you know, X, Y, and Z achievable policy goals. If we go to 30, then like, this is what we can accomplish. I just feel like there's, at the moment, there feels like there's no alignment between what we're trying to do for students and what these larger governance entities are meant to do. I mean, we talk about money, which is like undeniably really critical, right? Like we have some sense from various consultants about what the money means, but what do we, I mean, what are we actually talking about in terms of quality?
We talked about sharing resources. It'd be much easier for a larger district to share resources, right? Which we
Yeah.
try to, and outcome.
No, I totally agree with that. I feel like we currently have mechanisms to sort of move us in that direction without, you know, I feel like we're stuck in this mindset of it's either like 0 or it's 100, you know, like we have ways to move forward that are on a somewhat different scale or a different timeline. I don't know, that's just kind of my opinion.
And that's sort of what, going back to what I was trying to say, setting our values and goals and vision for the future of the transformation of education in Vermont answers the questions that you're asking. And I totally agree. I'm concerned that we haven't put that, we've got ideas and concepts, and I think we've got a good start, but we haven't formulated it in agreement in this committee. It's the issue.
We'll do a round table on the issue of districts, where everybody sort of stands as to, you can answer it as, here's my number and here's how I think we should do it. Or here's my range and I have no idea, just, you know, or I don't have a number, I think other people should decide and make a recommendation to us. So Chris, I think I don't want to speak about it, I think yours is pretty clear.
Yeah, I would go just off the top of my head, no higher than the 14 with the counties. That's just a starting point.
And you are still advocating that this get done by the legislature this year.
Yes.
Kate?
I wonder about the Commission on the Future of Public Education and what their role could be in this. And I also think that, strongly believe that we need data from GIS first before we start carving the state.
So I'm gonna rephrase that or paraphrase it. You're saying probably a different entity should do this and come back to us with a recommendation. And that they should be resourced with the information they need to make that recommendation.
Yes.
Okay.
She named the entity. So I think you heard my feedback before. I don't believe we're ready to sit in this committee or have time to sit in this committee and do right by our students, our school systems, our education system, and Vermonters. We don't have the time to draw those lines ourselves and engage in the conversations that it's gonna have to take place. But I do want very much to make sure that we set the parameters and goals and decide who would form those lines. I don't have any particular number in mind, but I do think 5 is too few. And so I don't, you know, to me, the goals are a heck of a lot more important than the lines. And I guess I really feel like I need to mention when we start talking about lines, it might be easy when you're sitting in a supervisory district. But when you're sitting in a supervisory union like mine with multiple different ways of delivering, no matter what line we draw, big decisions will need to be made around how that district operates. And so that's why I keep trying to figure out how we're going to create those boundaries around all of that. And I don't mean physical boundaries, you know? So that's, I guess, my biggest concern. And I really do believe that there's a lot of engagement from Vermonters. And I think Vermonters truly support our public education system and want to see it transformed into a better system. And so do I. I still haven't seen in this where we save even with 5 districts. So I don't even really, the money thing, Vermonters told me very clearly they want lower property tax rates. I never heard anyone, and many may feel this way, but I never heard anyone say, I want you to spend less money on education. It was really a loud message about property tax rates are out of control and something needs to change. And I think it's on us to make sure that we do make some changes. But I want to base that on values and goals and data, accurate data.
I did hear not just lower my property taxes, but spend less money on education. I heard that a lot. Also the quality concerns and not a lot of teacher bashing because they're not being able to do the work they want to do because you're mired down in, like I said, 119 school budgets, 119 people or, 52 SUs trying to design their proficiency grading. Oh, the duplication of work is exhausting, and seems unnecessary. My number, I think it's gonna have to go big enough to reach the scale. I think doing it a half measure of saying, oh, we're just gonna go to 50 instead of 119 is not gonna accomplish the goals that need to be accomplished for scale, for quality, for finances, sharing of resources. Is it 5? No, maybe not. I might be more in line with what Taylor said. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's a dozen. But I would also agree with Kate, until I've actually seen a map of where the students are and, what makes sense. Even if we don't draw actual lines, if I look at it, I might have a sense of saying, oh yeah, that looks like we definitely need to have 20, or 5 looks good, or I need to.
We need a school
Or
there.
we need a school here, or we need it here, but there's one that's close that might work. But I need that visual of the mapping. I think the process, that Adam went through, I think having some concrete steps of what's worked is very helpful. Is it us that does it? Probably not. But I'd like to see the map first to say, and set our priorities so that you can actually have criteria to give to whoever does this work.
I think it's pretty obvious. I would do between 1 school district, which we've talked about for years, between 1 and 12, I think would be where I would be at. I think where the savings comes in is within those larger districts where the shared resources that Representative Taylor talked about. But it's also, you're gonna get better outcomes from kids because more opportunity. You're gonna be able to share those resources with places that may not have had that help before. So you're gonna pull certain places up while maintaining, they're getting a good quality education. We need to continue to focus on the students and what's right for them. And I believe that we have that here. And I think where the savings comes from in this bill would become from the foundation formula based on the size of the districts. That will change, like I said, if we go up further than 12 to 20. And I think it's those shared resources. So I'd be in favor of us doing the lines this year, if it's us or someone in this building this year getting this done, between 1 and 12.
I feel like there needs to be an educational reason that is really clearly attached to the number that we go with. And that is not population. I think that class size is important, but I think that sort of what our kids have access to and what communities exist and, you know, have that flexibility between urban and rural numbers, which should be different. I would go with either 14 or 17. I would either go with counties or CTEs. To me, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you were holding a gun to my head, I'd say the same. I think the CTE model makes sense. Counties make sense if we had just like do it today. But I love what that guy said about the mapping. Here where the students are, here where the schools are, this is where they go. I mean, it'd be kind of cool to see that, and might influence us. So, but if you made me choose today, I'd say county, CTE, makes sense, I guess.
Who does it?
Isn't it already done? Well, we know where the counties are. And the CTE says, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
I know, that's why I said, if you're holding a gun to my head.
Don't think he was.
You know,
But I would
Out of this
also love to
building.
see the mapping. I would love to see like, oh, here are the kids, this is where they go to school, like. That might make it easy. Or,
I mean, so do you feel that we are the ones to do it? Or do you think that we are the ones to take a recommendation? From another entity?
I would love to see a recommendation. Like I said, if you held the gun to my head today, I'd say 14, 17, that works. But if you said, well, you know, what if we could hire somebody tomorrow?
Can
And
I
they could do this.
speak to that question too, since I also had this
Yeah.
point of view? I think that if we went with counties or CTEs, we would, I mean, we might be overthinking how complicated that will be. I'm not saying it'll be easy. Let's just take a map and we could be done before lunch. But I think that we are capable of doing it if we made this a commitment to do so, if we went with one of those.
So if we were gonna do that, we'd have to identify where all the schools are,
Yeah.
know the population of each of those schools, right? I mean, we,
Yep. And I think some
needs to be-
flexibility in
let's say-
saying,
It needs to be a public process.
Yes.
It's gonna
Yeah.
require a lot.
Yep.
I'll just remind folks that I have, in my county, I have one supervisory union who can choose which
Yeah.
CTE center they go.
Yeah.
I wish it were just as simple as what everyone's saying, but that's not actually correct. It's not.
but what we're talking about right now also is making choices for some people that chose something else. Or, I mean, which I also have mixed feelings.
I'm not
about,
trying to put up bears, I'm just saying
Yeah.
reality.
but yeah. I think we are capable of doing the work with the public hearing
Oh, I would say, and before the end of March,
Yeah.
and before the end of March.
with a weekend.
Well, we could skip our week, no, just joking.
And we would really, we would actually need to pop out a couple of bills before then.
Maybe a
It's just
couple
not
of these.
never feasible.
So, because we gotta be able to
I can't go
walk
back
and
to
chew
my
gum at the
desk.
same time.
Okay.
All right, Janet, you're up.
My due diligence.
Yes, so I guess, I mean, you all heard me speak to Superintendent Adams and his testimony, like I really, this is such a massive issue that I just really feel like we have to be confident in the process. And, you know, when I felt most confident making decisions in this committee has been when we have, you know, really extensively engaged the field because they are our education experts. Like, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an education policy expert beyond the years that I've spent sitting in this committee. So I just really feel like we've heard some really compelling thoughts from the various witnesses who've been in here, and to sort of not listen to that in this moment feels, I don't know, precarious is maybe a dramatic word to use, but I think, you know, I really want this to be process driven in a way that's thoughtful.
Okay, that's not a specific enough answer.
Okay. So that's the short, that's
many.
a long rambling way of saying, like, I don't have the expertise or the information to pull a number out of my
Yeah,
head.
you're right.
Like, I feel like that just involves, a little more testimony, just more, you know, something research and data driven that really sort of points to a direction. I mean, we do have the start to that. We have heard some testimony. That's a good start on that. So I don't have a number. I guess I'm stuck on committing to a process that we're gonna feel confident about. So
And do you feel that that process can be accomplished by this body right here?
I don't think on the timeline that we've discussed, no, I think we need to create an entity that can do a pretty robust amount of work around this.
So as for me, I think about, what Picus has said in their research, that 3,900 is about the ideal size. I don't know how that was then translated into the 5 that were created, because it's sort of counter to what was in the Picus Odom report. And the Superintendent Association's policy brief also cited research about the same 4,000 number. But how that translates into numbers of districts, I don't know, but what I do feel is true is that moving from, and I usually use a number 52, because it's really what we're talking about is consolidating central offices. But from 52 to 5 is almost beyond comprehension, the ability to make that transformation happen. It's a very multi-year transition. I also look at the geographic differences and distances at that scale, and it is hard to fathom something that goes from the Canadian border to Bradford on the east side and to essentially Rutland County on the west side. So I'm having a little comprehension trouble with that. So what's my number? I would apply that about 4,000 and see what it is. That probably gets us somewhere between, I would say 14 to 20.
They're 84,000
I did
students.
83.
Couple dozen.
And I really do believe that the process, so I have to think about what is our schedule, what can we literally accomplish here? Can we draw lines? I mean, there are ramifications to what we do that we probably don't even know.
Right.
But, for example, a district that has different ways of delivering education can't exist. So,
Currently, in the current statute.
well, I would say, it can't really exist in operational anyway, because how do you have a district where one group of people has something one way and one group has another without one of them saying, I want that, and suing? And we have got lots of folks watching what happens in Vermont. We have been the subject of numerous lawsuits that many people don't go to the US Supreme Court. So those types of things weigh on my mind. I don't want to pass the law that leads to the lawsuit that turns us into a full choice state where money can go to any kind of educational institution, whether they follow our non-discrimination laws or not. So I worry about those big ramifications. We can certainly address that. The language is sitting right in the committee bill that we put on the table that would solve that, but I'm not sure the rest of this committee is ready to go that far either. So I think about those sorts of major issues. And I don't think we have the time or the capacity to be able to move ahead in the time we have left. And with the amount of public sort of input we would need, I think that's something that has to come back to us as a recommendation. And maybe the group that does it is a group of legislators with a very clear public process and a very clear list of goals that we come up with. Tell me I'm all wrong.
No, I am going to just say I didn't get a chance to do my narrative. I gave more direct answers.
You went first.
You were number
It's gonna be
one.
a short narrative that I'm not saying that we don't continue to find out information on the lines and draw lines down. By no means saying that. I'm saying we still need information. We still need to figure things out. And I believe that there would be a way for us to get more time if we needed more time somehow. I think that would be, I'm not sure how, but
I'm sure whatever we do, the Senate has to do it all over again.
That's right.
I would also say that I think we are doing Vermonters a disservice if we are not moving the park with something.
And I am in no way saying we don't move forward with something. I am talking about timing, public input, and what are our achievables to move forward with this year? And I appreciate this healthy debate. It's good for all of us.
And
I
there.
also think, I mean, looking at what are the numbers that everyone says, that it's important that we let Vermonters know at this point, if we're not considering the 5, that that's not really on the table. I mean, I received so many emails about that, and it doesn't sound from everyone going around like we would really consider that, with the
There are
exception of
some.
Casey.
I just don't have enough
Um,
information. I need the map.
Right, but I guess I'm just at what,
think it's hard.
at what point should we be more honest with Vermont? Not that we're being dishonest, that's not what I'm implying. And be like, this isn't really on the table, we're not doing that. And I feel like maybe that time has come.
That's an excellent question and point. I'm not sure it's today.
No, I'm not saying let's make a press conference this afternoon, but like, it doesn't really sound like that's gonna happen to me from what I'm hearing. And I feel like there are a bunch of people saying that shouldn't happen. So like, at some point, I think that we should say,
I
you're
would
right. it probably
absolutely
won't.
agree with you, Leanne, that we haven't had any testimony and we haven't had any members lobby hard for 5. Or anybody.
And people are really worried about it. And they think, some people think that's gonna happen.
But I do want to embrace the concept of fewer.
Yeah, sure. That's
And-
not what
and
I'm
that,
saying.
you know, there was a bold proposal that was put out there, but it doesn't mean we have to stick to it. But I think we seem to have sort of a universal acceptance that yes, fewer than 52 central offices. is
Significant.
appropriate.
And sorry, can I add one more thing, that we may find that we work better with Secretary Saunders too, if we can really be upfront and be like, okay, we've heard your plan. We are rejecting that particular aspect of it, so that she can use her skills and time to, you know, come up with something that we will, or to work with us on something that we will accept.
Well, I think one part of this whole process, this whole big public process that is missing is having the governor out there, hearing from Vermonters, just, and then to see, you know, this is his plan. It is based on work his administration did. And, you know, frankly, I think that he needs to hear from Vermonters as much as we do, but probably more so, because he's the one who really needs to explain it and sell it to Vermonters.
Yes, just want to reiterate, and we've talked about this before, and I've mentioned it before, that us pushing the timeline also pushes the timeline of the foundation formula. Also needs some consideration there because we're buying down the tax rate for $77 million this year. We push that foundation formula out further, where are we gonna find the $77 million next year? And how are we going to? So it's the domino effect.
Just two comments that one, 77 million has not been decided. And
True.
2, we don't, I suspect Ways and Means is also having conversations like this as to what is achievable this year, where's the data, all of that. And so I'm not even sure.
Thank you for clarifying. 77 is not, you're right, it's not been decided, but that is the proposal.
But I would just say that Ways and Means also may not be ready to implement a foundation formula this year.
If we don't
I
have
don't think it's
districts
gonna
for
be
them,
this
they
year.
definitely won't be ready.
No. Because they're also finding challenges. I mean, just challenges, we've even discussed some of the challenges, like how do you do it without a statewide teachers contract? How do you know, do it with many, many things?
Just going sort of back to your concerns and thoughts around the 5, I actually think that if the governor's proposal had come to us with 15, we would have had the same concerns coming back. I think the number it isn't really the challenge, it's the change that's the challenge. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't want to get too hung up on actual numbers. I'm gonna work with not only the legislature and Vermonters and families, but with the governor and the secretary too, to come up with the right answer here. But I really don't, you know, whether it's 5 upsetting people or 20 upsetting people, the change is the challenge, and we need to come up with how we implement change that works for kids and communities and citizens. dollars.
So this probably has nothing to do with us, but you're talking about achievables and. Cause one thing I heard about, no matter what your transition is, whether it's 5 or 15 or whatever. We don't have common data systems, we don't have common student reporting systems. You know, when the business managers mention, but we can't mandate,
So,
you must use.
yes, yes,
Can't-
we can.
Yes, we
This is
can.
right in our
And,
bill.
but
This is
so,
our community bill.
again, if we want to just circle back to achievables, I would throw
It
in.
says you will, but it doesn't, so that is
Well, this is
finance,
draft,
right?
remember, but-
Right, it
but
is.
This is
But
what we.
would that be a step toward the transition process to get,
I think there are
the way
these
people can
sorts of
work in
things
current
that
state
we
and
could
future state
say,
at the same time?
Yeah.
statewide graduation requirements,
Yes, because the quality
statewide,
piece, yeah.
standard, statewide data management, both financial and student
And
management.
student and calendars.
School
And school calendar,
You
you know,
That's
Can
what I
I-
liked.
could I assume we all
It's the
have general agreement on that, on those smaller things, data systems that are universal?
School calendar.
Calendar that would line up.
Yeah, I would agree.
Start making those moves,
I
because no
think-
matter what the.
I would have
number
to
is.
see what their calendar looks
Yeah,
like. and
everybody.
Hear
Well,
some more from the field.
I'm not
before
sure
I-
we would come up with, I think we would task the AOE to develop it.
Okay.
Are you throwing statewide contracts into that?
I'm not
Okay.
gonna do that yet.
That's a biggie.
That's
That's
down
huge.
the road.
All right, this is gonna say yes, but.
It would have to be negotiated.
But that's-
That's not something that we would.
Yeah.
we would just-
Implement.
But that is a problem with calendar because not all teachers have the same number of in-service days, the same number of work days. the
That's
same-
why I would recommend that.
Somebody
the
else do
AOE
it?
be tasked with.
They actually- that's part of
As
it.
we have tasked them with it.
Well, it's part of our committee
times.
bills.
180 days,
Um,
this many in service, right?
I was gonna say, I think that was what I was trying to say, maybe in a not a very clear way earlier, like what are the, like laying the foundation
Yeah.
for transformation, like what are the things we really could do now to
In our
make,
current state.
yes, to make the other things, whatever they end up being, possible, or setting ourselves up for success.
What we can do now.
This is not gonna be easy.
Oh, gosh, no.
And the more thoughtful we are about the process and the more we integrate feedback from not just the field, but from our communities,
Mhm.
I don't want to say it's gonna be easy or smooth, but it will lay groundwork for less challenge. And what, can I just mention two other things?
Yeah.
That I really deeply believe that if in the end, whatever we decide to do down the road, schools end up closing, I think I know we've got it in our committee bill about the school construction aid. But I also really believe that communities, because this isn't only about our students and although I want to keep students first and front on everything. Our communities are really struggling with what to do
Yeah.
down the road. And I just want to keep that in mind about how we can support communities if they're going to lose their school. And I have no idea when or who or what, but I just want to make sure that they're supported in this process.
I mean, I think nothing that we
Oh,
propose, and the governor said the same, or the
Yeah.
secretary of state said the same thing, nothing is in any of these says closing schools.
Right.
But
But
it
if
is
the
setting up
result is-
parameters
That's
that
the
might
intent.
lead to that decision.
Yeah.
And anyway, very, that Commerce is supposed to take that up, and we need to keep it top of mind as we do a construction bid.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to just say.
And I will also say that we have had folks come in and say, you need to help us out with that or make us do it. Another sort of controversial thing that goes along with that is that, in order to achieve the scale that we think helps bend the cost curve, we would need to sunset the articles of agreement, or
Yes.
at least the portions of them that say a town gets to have a veto power over closing school.
Right.
That's not gonna go over well.
It will-
No.
Yeah. Seems like a necessary first step, though,
Yeah, but it's-
in my
Get
opinion,
pushed
that's an
back.
opinion.
I realize we didn't come to any conclusions.
Okay.
We didn't
and
figure it out.
It just goes to show how really challenging this is.
Good conversation.
It was
But
a great
yeah, I'm
conversation.
really glad everybody had a
Yeah.
chance to really lay it out there. So anyway, we'll take lunch. We'll be back. I have to do a press conference at 1:15. Chris will handle the starting of that testimony with the secretary. The focus of that is budgetary questions, so we can
Yeah.
finish up our budget letter, Rob. And
Okay.
if there's time, available and you want to ask some questions about what we heard yesterday, as time allows, that'd be fine too. All right, we'll close there.
And then at 2, we're downstairs.
At 2, so at 2,
Or we.
we will be downstairs and we will be having legislative council with us. And it would be a time to ask questions.
Mhm.
If you feel like you don't know what something said in what you heard yesterday, to the extent that legislative council is able
Right,
to interpret it, they will, or they might say, I'm unable to
right.
answer that question without, more consulting. Anyway, that's